All right, this is where things start to get interesting. What I'm about to show you today is not speculation. It's not hype, and it's definitely not something you're going to hear broken down like this on mainstream media. What you're seeing unfold right now is the quiet integration of a new financial architecture. And at the center of it are XRP and XLM. Banks are involved, regulators are involved, central banks are involved, and most people have absolutely no idea what's happening behind the scenes. So stick with me through the end of this video because we're going to go down the rabbit hole. We're going to connect some dots, and by the time we're done, you're going to understand why XRP and XLM keep showing up in rooms where most crypto projects will never be invited. If you enjoy this kind of deep dive breakdown, do me a favor, smash that thumbs up button and subscribe. It helps push this content out, and more importantly, it tells the algorithm that people actually want real research, not just price predictions. Now let me be very clear before we begin. This is not a Bitcoin hate video. I hold Bitcoin. I respect Bitcoin. Bitcoin played a massive role in getting us to where we are today. But what I want to show you is that while everyone's attention is being funneled in one direction, institutions are quietly building something much bigger underneath the surface. And XRP and XLM are part of that foundation. Let's start with something simple. For years now, large financial institutions have been telling you exactly what they're doing, but they do it in documents, in closed-door panels, and in regulatory discussions that most retail investors never look at. They don't shout it on Twitter, they don't put it in flashy headlines, they publish it and move on. And the key word that keeps appearing over and over again is integration. Not replacement, not disruption, integration. Banks are not trying to burn the system down, they're trying to upgrade it. So let's take a step back and talk about how this transition actually works. Right now, most global finance still runs on legacy infrastructure. Slow settlement, high fees, fragmented systems, liquidity trapped in silos. And every large institution knows this system is inefficient, but they also know they can't flip a switch overnight. That's why what we're seeing today is a parallel build-out. Private systems being tested, public blockchains being evaluated, bridges being created between the two. And institutions have been very open about this strategy. They build in controlled environments first. They test scalability. They test compliance. They test governance. And when regulatory clarity reaches a certain threshold, they move smoothly, not suddenly, onto public infrastructure. This is exactly why XRP and XLM matter. Because from day one, they were designed with this transition in mind. Fast settlement, low cost, high throughput, finality, and most importantly, compatibility with regulated finance. Now let's talk about something you'll notice if you actually follow the data. You don't see thousands of crypto projects sitting in meetings with regulators. You don't see meme coins at policy roundtables. You don't see experimental chains advising central banks on payments infrastructure. But you do see the same names, over and over and over again. XRP, XLM, a small group of infrastructure-focused networks. Why? Because institutions don't care about narratives. They care about function. They care about reliability. And they care whether something can operate at scale without breaking the system. And this is where a lot of people get confused. They think adoption looks like price. They think validation looks like hype. They think success looks like social media buzz. That's not how infrastructure adoption works. Infrastructure gets built quietly. It gets tested quietly. It gets integrated quietly. And then one day, it's just there, and everyone uses it without thinking about it. That's exactly how the internet was built, and it's exactly how financial rails are being rebuilt now. Now let's talk specifically about bank involvement. Banks are not experimenting with XRP and XLM because they're trendy. They're experimenting because they solve very specific problems that legacy systems cannot. Cross-border settlement, liquidity management, real-time payments, interoperability between systems. These are not theoretical use cases. These are trillion-dollar problems. And when banks explore solutions, they don't ask which asset will pump the hardest. They ask which system reduces cost, increases speed, and fits within regulatory frameworks. That's why XRP keeps coming up in discussions around cross-border payments. That's why XLM keeps appearing in conversations about financial inclusion and settlement layers. And that's why both are consistently included in pilots, proofs of concept, and real-world implementations. This is also why you'll hear institutional voices say things like, "These assets are not being evaluated as speculative instruments, but as financial utilities." That distinction matters more than most people realize, because once an asset is viewed as infrastructure, its role changes. It's no longer competing for attention, it's competing for adoption. And adoption doesn't happen on YouTube, it happens in boardrooms. Now here's where things really start to connect. As regulation becomes clearer, institutions don't ask whether public blockchains will be used, they ask how they will be used. And what we're seeing is a shift away from single closed systems toward more open, interoperable networks. This is where XRP and XLM fit perfectly. They're not trying to replace banks. They're not trying to overthrow the system. They're designed to plug into it. And that's exactly why regulators are willing to talk about them. You'll often hear people say, if this is real, why isn't everyone talking about it? And the answer is simple, because this phase isn't designed for the public, it's designed for infrastructure. Most of what's happening right now is happening in working papers, pilot programs, regulatory sandboxes, and industry roundtables. These things don't trend, but they matter. And when you start seeing the same assets referenced across multiple regions, multiple institutions, and multiple regulatory discussions, that's not coincidence. That's convergence. Now let's address the elephant in the room: Bitcoin and Ethereum. Bitcoin is widely acknowledged as a store of value. Ethereum is widely acknowledged as a programmable environment. There's nothing wrong with that. But when it comes to payments, settlement, and liquidity movement, institutions consistently point out the same limitations: scalability, cost, finality, and predictability. This doesn't mean these networks disappear. It means they serve different roles. And this brings us to one of the most important concepts in all of finance. Assets don't compete on price, they compete on purpose. XRP and XLM are not trying to be everything. They're trying to be very good at very specific things. And those things just happen to sit at the core of how money moves globally. Now, let's zoom out for a moment. Why does all of this matter? Because what's being built right now is not a new app. It's not a new trading product. It's not a short-term narrative. It's a new financial layer. A layer where assets move 24/7, settlement is near instant, liquidity is programmable, and systems can talk to each other seamlessly. And when that layer becomes operational at scale, the value flows toward the rails that support it. This is why institutions are patient. This is why they test quietly, and this is why retail investors often miss the early stages. Because early stages are boring, they're technical, they're document-heavy, and they require conviction. Now, I want to be very clear. None of this is financial advice. I'm not telling you to buy anything. I'm not telling you what will happen to price tomorrow, next month, or next year. What I am telling you is this. When banks, regulators, and financial institutions repeatedly study the same assets, when those assets appear in real implementations, not just headlines, and when they're consistently framed as infrastructure rather than speculation, that's something worth paying attention to. This is not about hype. This is not about memes. This is about positioning. And XRP and XLM are positioned not for retail excitement, but for institutional relevance. Infrastructure doesn't explode overnight. It gets built, it gets reinforced, and then one day it becomes unavoidable. If you're watching this right now, you're not late. You're early to understanding what's actually being built. And with that being said, if you got value from this breakdown, make sure you hit that thumbs up button, subscribe for more deep dives like this, and I'll see you in the next video. because the rabbit hole goes a lot deeper from here.